Sabers.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
Dosher.
Here.
McCardle.
Here.
Barrington.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Charks. Smith.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. It's nice to see a large crowd come in for this tonight. The purpose of tonight's meeting, I have placed on the agenda a proposition to purchase property just outside of Lake Mitchell, which will be used in the watershed development to help clean up the watershed as well as Lake Mitchell. This property is located 1 mile west of Lake Mitchell. We'll give you a minute here.
Sorry,
That's all right, we'll bring it up.
I zapped the computer apparently.
The property is currently owned by Harvey and Peg Kelly. Harvey, of course, passed away on us this last summer. So Mrs. Kelly is looking at downsizing and putting the property on the market for sale. In looking at this, the property was originally just a house and a building on 41 acres, an outbuilding. Mr. Croce found this property, brought it to me once some agricultural land was added to the property of the listing along with the house. Of course, the city is not as interested in the buildings as we are in the agricultural land, because the agricultural land, the agricultural, is that better? The agricultural land has the creek running right through it, which is ideal for what we need to do as part of the watershed cleanup and Lake Mitchell cleanup project. You able to get it up?
Yep. Sorry about that.
There we go. Okay. Does that help back there? Much better. We have put a lot of time into looking into this. We've partnered with numerous organizations. And I got to tell you, that, this is not my doing. The staff put a great deal of time and effort into this. Mr. Croce, Ms. Elwine, Mr. Johnson. So it is not all on me. I am thankful that they brought it to me. It just happened to be perfect timing for what we're trying to do. As you know, Lake Mitchell is a watershed that needs a lot of improvement to it. The DENR has it on their list of impaired lakes. It is a zero contact lake at this point in time, and we would like to do something to clean it up. The city has already spent money on studies or technical memorandums, if you will, on what needs to be done. The Lake Committee reviewed options for the lake and came forward with a recommendation that we clean up the lake via dredging, as well as put some work into the watershed to clean up the water coming into Lake Mitchell. 53% of the issue with phosphorus is the water entering Lake Mitchell through Firesteel Creek, of which it flows directly through the land that we are looking at purchasing here. Our intent for this, can we go to the next slide, please? This gives you kind of a look at the bottomland that is ideal for us and what we would be looking at trying to build a wetland in. We are not in any way, shape, or form trying to make a new lake. I have been approached with that. We have no intent of flooding this to a lot of depth. What our intent is to make a low head dam in the location of the old road and bridge abutment, which still exists. All the water that currently flows into Lake Mitchell goes between these two abutments. I should say the water that flows from Firesteel Creek into Lake Mitchell. So it makes it an ideal point at which to try and build a low head dam to raise the water slightly behind this. We're looking at trying to put anywhere from 6 inches to 1.5 feet, no more than 2 feet of water into the low-lying areas of the Kelly property in order for us to begin growing cattails and develop a wetland, which will help us remove phosphorus from the water. This will also act as a point where sediment will settle out of the creek or the water before it enters Lake Mitchell. This low-head dam, the intent of it is to be able to raise and lower the water level, raising it minimally to be able to create the wetland, and then the ability to drain that wetland so that we can do maintenance on it and whatever needs to be done to help ensure that we continue to maintain the removal of the phosphorus, which is entering Lake Mitchell. As you'll recall, the technical memorandum pointed out that 53% of the issue with the phosphorus entering Lake Mitchell is coming in through the creek. 47% of the issue is the lake itself. The lake will be addressed at a different point in time. Currently, I've had numerous conversations with people in the watershed, producers. I've had meetings with various entities, Ducks Unlimited, James River Watershed Development, NRCS. We are working. We've got a lot of cooperation with producers out in the watershed, and the possibility of doing something inland along the creek. The thing about doing that is that would be lease type options. Now, whether we lease that land for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's still a lease. When that lease is up, there is no guarantee that we would be able to get it back or go back into what we were doing with the lease at the time we took it out. What this does is gives the city a viable option for controlling an area where water is entering Lake Mitchell and doing with it as we need to do to help provide a cleaner water entering the lake and coming down the watershed. With that said, the property is shown here. Basically, you see the red square. See if I can use this. This red square is the land associated with the house. There's a little square here, which is approximately 1 acre, which is an outbuilding. It is actually 2 buildings that are roughly 80 by 40 in size, tied together in kind of an L shape. And this is the land we are most interested in with the city. This is tillable cropland. It has a lease. Currently, the lease is set up to 2030. And I think it's okay. Staley Farms, I believe, is the leasee for that. Staley Farms does do riparian habitat along the creek where it passes through their land, and they do practice sustainable farming, or no-till, I guess would be another way to call it, or think of
no-till.
Minimal no-till. They also use cover crops, very desirable to us because we are trying to limit runoff that would get into the creek as well. So this is the big property the city is interested in. When this came to me, initially this property was listed as just the buildings and the house for sale. The price continued to drop. It dropped down to $2.5 million for the buildings, at which time Mrs. Kelly opted to put an option on their listing to include roughly 330 acres of cropland. That's when it caught Mr. Croce's attention. Mr. Croce brought it into me. And Ms. Alwine and myself and Mr. Croce did a lot of due diligence on figuring out if this was doable with city financing. It will not raise property taxes within the city of Mitchell. It will not cost the city additional money. Let me back up. The city will help pay for this with funds that are coming from the leased land, cropland. And we'll go through the numbers here in just a little bit. But there is a small amount of, well, I consider it small. It's about $49,000, $50,000 that is not covered that the city would be picking up out of city funding for this land. But given that we're spending $4.1 million, that is a rather small amount of money to be paying for something that will help us clean up Lake Mitchell and be something that we have and control in that watershed. Can we go to the next one? Here's kind of an overall picture of it. Right now, if I turn around, does this get picked up all right?
Yeah, take your mic with you.
I'll take it with me. All right, very good. Here again is the Kelly property. This is the cropland that we're talking about. This is the real interesting stuff to us right here. Obviously, Lake Mitchell. This is the canal, the railroad bridge, as most people would know it. The city currently has, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but we currently have this land along the creek bed out to where the current road runs north and south across it. The county owns this little bump out here. This is where the old road, there was a crooked bridge road here. Back when I was in high school, some of you might know it as Dave Brewer. That's the bridge that Dave Brewer, who now has a football award named after him, had an accident on and cost him his life. That bridge was removed. Currently, there is still the road bed crossing the creek here with 2 concrete abutments that the water goes through, and that is where we would see a low head dam of some type being installed to help raise the water level slightly at the back end of this to flood the Kelly land.
Mr. Mayor
Yes.
and Council, that's correct. Can you hear me? That is correct on what you said about the city's ownership and the county's ownership parcel. There is an irregular track piece that is along the railroad tracks that we're still looking at. It doesn't seem like the ownership is clear, but a little bit further north, it's an irregular shaped piece. But we're working with Davidson County on that. The remainder of the plat or the tracks are owned by the city of Mitchell, and then that piece owned by Davidson County.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. There again, you can see the 1 acre, the 40 acres, the 1 acre, and the 330 acres of land. Next slide, please. Okay, the white cross hatching, we checked into what the FEMA's 100-year floodplain looked like for this area, and the white cross hatching covers that. In this instance, this would put water at or over the West End Bridge, so that's a considerable raise in the level of water Lake Mitchell. We are not proposing that. What we want is just a minimal amount of water to be raised behind our bridge, or excuse me, our dam, to flood the low-lying area, the Kelly property, to begin growing cattails and other vegetation which will absorb the phosphorus that is coming into Lake Mitchell. And it also will allow settling out of some of the, or most of, we hope, the sediment that is following the water into the lake as well. As you can see, you know, this is the area, here's the railroad bridge. It substantially floods the area between the railroad bridge and I think it's 409th Street, the road that runs north and south through this area. 406 Avenue. This is the Kelly area, the area we would like to have the dam would be right in here, and we would flood back into here. We would not probably get as high as this is showing. This gets in, this is Mr. Lauren Van Overshield's land, and he gets a little bit of water onto his land under the 100-year flood. If we were to have a 100-year flood, we do not want to do that. We don't want to encroach on his property at all with anything we do. We want to simply raise the water level to give us 6 inches to 2 feet of water to grow cattails in this area here. A couple of the things we are looking at as far as this land, it would be a nature area. It would be, can we go to the next slide? There again, you kind of seen more of the floodplain. We've had discussions with USDA, NRCS, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, DNR, Corps of Engineers. We've done a lot of footwork on this. Mr. Croce did a lot of footwork on this. One thing that this will help us with is we can go after grants to help us further get production in the watershed with the money that we use to purchase this land. I should say we are also looking at replatting the land that the buildings sit on to be roughly 10 acres, which you'll see here in the blue. The house is right here, right in here. This is the shed. We would roughly make that 10 acres. The benefit of that is it gives us some more low-lying area in which to use for our wetland. Plus, it gives us additional in-kind type money that we can use to go after matching grants and that kind of thing. We see this as being a big benefit to being able to fund what the consultants had told us we need to do in the watershed at a very reasonable cost. No, you're right. A couple of the areas, you know, this is some of the benefits we would see. We're going to preserve it into a wetland area, or excuse me, a wild area, nature area, wetland. Obviously, wildlife, currently there's an abundance of deer and pheasants in the area. A lot of geese and ducks use the area. We will keep the cropland and the lease that's associated with that. That is part of how we're going to look at paying for this. Nature trails are a possibility out there, and those would be something similar to what currently is around Lake Mitchell. If you've been out there, there's some bike trails, hiking trails. I think the bike club did a bunch of those for us, did they not, Nate? Yeah. So, and I do know that those get a lot of use from people just hiking the area periodically. People love it as a destination for riding bicycles. We could also use this as an area for canoeing and kayaking. Our intent is not to have motorized vehicles in this area. Of course, we've had a lot of discussions with Ducks Unlimited. They're very excited about this. They are willing to help us work on getting matching grants for additional work in the watershed. I don't know that anybody we have talked to has not expressed a lot of exhilaration with what we're trying to do here. Mr. Croce, can you speak to some of the organizations that you've had conversations with?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor and Council, we've already talked with USDA and Heidi over there. I know we want to put together a plan, and we already have a plan in place for development of this land into a watershed and a watershed area for this location and water quality improvements. So we've talked already to start a program with a design through USDA and possibly Game Fish and Parks, and actually get a design for settling ponds and what you had been talking about was the grassland areas and the wetland areas with cattails. Talked to James River Water Development District even today, and they are excited with partnering with us on a plan to moving forward with this, as well as Pheasants Forever and Ducks Unlimited. So, and Davison County just recently today and yesterday. I think we've got a lot of good partnerships already established to move forward with this.
Thank you. Okay, the purchase agreement. As I stated, the buildings in the outbuildings are being listed. They were listed with a realtor at $2.5 million. That's roughly 40. It's actually 41 acres roughly. The agricultural was about 330 acres, 331 acres, and it was listed with a realtor or in the sales information as 1.6 million. That brings the total purchase of this purchase to 4.1 million. There is an existing crop lease that is through December 31st of 2030. That would be used to help pay down our debt service. Currently, the home, the owner has, we wrote into the agreement that the owner would have up to 24 months to stay in the house while she looks for another place to live. She is considering building, one of the things she had considered was building another house on a few acres in this area. And we told her we would have worked with her with that, but she, in the end, decided she wanted to just move away from this whole property. So she is going to be looking for residence elsewhere, either in the town or possibly, I think she has some more land that is owned by the family a little bit south and west of this area.
Mayor, one point there. We were working on the PowerPoint, but this actually got updated yesterday, and we didn't get it changed here. That should actually say continue to reside up to 30 months.
Oh, okay. So it's at 30 months.
An additional 6 months, since it's going to take some time to
I apologize
know whether this is going to proceed or not.
Right, and the reason for that is, of course, this is going to take time for us to put everything together and come through with financing and whatnot. So, Ms. Elwine, would you like to speak to the debt service?
Sure. When the conversation first started about the potential purchase of property, we actually had a debt service schedule run on a $4.1 million sales tax bond. That annual repayment is slightly under $300,000 a year, but I use that as the repayment amount. We looked at ways to service the debt. We have our existing payment that the city receives from POET. We used to use that as just supplement for water infrastructure, and 2 years ago the city changed and dedicated that towards Lake Mitchell improvements. So it'd be the annual POET payment that we receive. We have the existing crop lease, as was stated before, that goes through 2030. That's in the amount of $22,000. There's an existing CRP for $1,000 a year, and that goes through 2023. And Kyle has had conversations about other opportunities for similar or different programs that we could enter some of those areas into once that one expires. So in all, that brings the total, I think I had it on the next page. Yep. That the existing revenue would cover 84% of the debt, requiring an annual debt contribution from the city in the amount of $49,000.
And it will not raise city taxes. One thing we're looking at doing, next slide please, is annexing this area, particularly the wetland area, into the city limits. You see here what it would look like. We would include the residents and the buildings into that. The reason for that is, should we not be able to sell them? Our goal, we don't want the buildings. I mean, could we get this without the buildings? That would be great, but we have to have the buildings in order to get the land. So it's a package deal. We get the buildings. Our intent would be to resell the buildings. The city, the council would have to look at how they want to do that. Within 30 months of the purchase, I would assume we would be selling it, or possibly even trying to sell it during that 30 months. If we could not sell it, there are other options that could be out there. Something like an event, having somebody take a lease on this so that the city's not running a business. We don't want to be in the business of running a business of any kind out there. The city could look at possibly leasing it. I have had conversations with people who are in the business of catering and leasing, and they find this to be a very intriguing facility or place to host events. You've all been through it. You know what it looks like. It's a unique, very, very unique property. Very picturesque everywhere from the koi pond to the backyard, which overlooks the wetland we want to create. If we were to do that, of course, there would be, it would depend on what the lease, we would lease the land out at, but that would be an income to this, any lease that the city would do should that happen. We would also have the ability then to collect first, second, and entertainment sales tax on it. We would obviously, if we were to have to lease this out, we would have to have an accounting of how much was being brought in by whoever the leasee was, and an accounting for the sales tax. So there could be additional revenue should that have to happen, coming in off sales tax as well as lease. As I said, that's not our intent. Our intent at this point is to resell the property, the buildings, and maintain the agricultural land to do the cleanup of Lake Mitchell. Anyway, this is what it would look like if we were to take the wild area, what I call a nature area. It kind of doesn't follow any hard solid lines, but it would be kind of an irregular shape where you see future city limits. That would be the bottom land and the grasslands that are created out there for the wetland. Down in the lower area, down here is where the residents would be. Of course, that would then be in the city. That could pose a slight issue because your taxes would go up slightly on that piece of property should it be sold. But it's such a unique piece of property that I think if we were to find a buyer for it, it would be a bonus for us. And of course, could you go back for a second, please? Of course, this is the area I talked about that the city owns. We would have to talk with the county about this little piece. Is that correct, Mr. Croce? Yeah. Because this is still county, this little bump out, where the city has basically the channel, I'll call it, of the creek, all the way to the bridge on the west end. So Our intent is not to flood anybody out. We don't want to create a new large lake. Some of you may remember, especially you in the audience, back in, I want to say the 60s, there was a proposal put forth to add 2 additional lakes in the watershed above Lake Mitchell, and that is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a way to create wetlands and shallow water areas in order to use vegetation to pull the phosphorus out of the lake and to create areas where sediment can fall out of the water and not be carried into Lake Mitchell. Okay, next slide, please. Of course, this goes back to our 2017 technical memorandum. We need to control the sediment. As you're aware, back in the mid-'80s, we did have a lot of sediment and cattails on the west end of Lake Mitchell that were dredged out. And the reason for that wasn't to get rid of the cattails or the sediment. It was to create volume because this was our water source back in the 80s. We no longer use Lake Mitchell as a water source. We do have a study ongoing about secondary sources of water. We're waiting for the results of that yet. We do not see Lake Mitchell as being part of that. The water would most likely come from either more BY water or more Randall water. Somebody along the Missouri River would be our source of additional water for Lake Mitchell. What we're doing here follows along what was recommended by our consultant that did the technical memorandum. I've had conversations as I was running for this office. A lot of people were in favor of doing something in the watershed, and this gets a big piece of that puzzle taken care of. This is a big part. It won't be all of it. It is not the magic potion, but it takes care of a lot of what we need to do. So I would urge you to be in favor of this and vote for it, and we can start proceeding with trying to clean up Firesteel Watershed and Lake Mitchell. Any questions?
Mayor, you had a conversation with the grower to the west of you today, Lauren Van Overshelden, and he's the property right west of there. You had no, is he here?
Yeah, they need you to turn on your microphone.
Anyway, you had a conversation today with Lauren Van Overshelden, and he had no problem with this. He butts the property to the west.
He does. He butts up. He came into my office this morning and we had a discussion with him. His concern was flooding of the land, his land, and water getting onto his the areas that he's built up into his house. He has a very nice home. His house is located right here, and he overlooks the valley. He had concerns with how deep the water was going to be and how far it was going to back up. We are not going to get water into his land with what we're trying to do. We're doing a very low head dam with the ability to drain it. Mr. Van Overshield was under the impression we were going to do one of the items in the technical memorandum was a lake and a bypass, so we could collect the water and then open a large pipe and take it around Lake Mitchell, in which case we would have had a much deeper, a larger dam and a deeper pond from which to take the water and move it around Lake Mitchell. That is not what we are doing here. We are using nature to clean the water and remove the phosphorus, and of course the natural stagnation, if you will, of the water to drop out the sediment, the particles.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just want to mention that any kind of design that we do will be permitted through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It'll go through DNR for the state, and we'll work with Davidson County. So that is the last thing we want to do. We do not want to negatively impact our neighbors or any part of this. So we'll start with the permitting when we do the design as well.
Correct. We want to be good neighbors with everybody out in the watershed. Our intent is to help them as well as help ourselves. One thing I should point out too is Mrs. Kelly will be paying the cost of maintaining the home while she's living in it. So that will not be borne by the city as well. That was part of the agreement. Anybody in the audience want to ask a question?
Hi, my name is Stephen Larson. Have a few questions about the valuation of just everything. What is the residential property, that 41 acres in the buildings, currently valued at by the Director of Equalization?
I believe it's in the $2 million range.
And then who is the realtor or who is the representative of this property?
The realtor is Mr. Harity out of Colorado. Don Harity, I believe is his name.
Okay. And then,
This is all her. These are people she chose to use.
Right.
Not who the city chose.
correct. And then what is the cropland, that 330 acres, what is that currently valued at?
I guess I would have to.
It's on our website. You can look it up on the website,
Okay.
Okay.
county website.
All right. I guess just my questions on that being, if it's being rented out at $22,000 per year, I'm assuming that was for the full 330 acres? That lease
No,
room?
that's for
No.
177.2 acres of
Right.
tillable farm ground.
It's
Okay.
just the tillable stuff that's being rented,
And I believe that came up to $125 an acre.
Okay, so about 125.
which is, I believe, what the going rate these days.
Right. Well, average for Southeast Territory was about 203, according to an SDSU cropland survey.
And around here,
In Southeast South Dakota, average was
We're not southeast, we're south central.
South Central. All right, then drop
I
down a
have
little
farm
bit.
ground, if I wish I could get $203.
I know, right? Well, and that's what I was wondering, because purchasing 330 at 1.6 million comes out to about $4,800 per acre, which I don't know what your cropland is valued at, but I don't think we're anywhere near that high, especially if only 170 is arable, because that's
$4,800 an acre for cropland?
if we pay
I-
1.6 million for 330 acres, comes out to $4,800 per acre.
Mr. Kiner, what's cropland going for these days?
I just sold cropland at auction less than a month ago. It fell between 4,300 and 4,900.
Well, we're right in the ballpark.
For 330 acres of arable land, whereas apparently we only have 170,000. What does, what does that leave? Is that 160 acres of swampland, or what is that currently labeled as if it's not tillable land?
Well, it would be creek bottom, so I don't know if that would be considered pasture land or not.
Because that's nearly half the land. That is less than half the value of that. I'm just trying to get what our values are. I get that this is a very long-term project, but I feel like we're being raked over the coals as far as the property values and everything go. And then have we looked at all, has there been any look at what the house would actually be able to sell for if we knock off the 31 acres, reduce it to a 10-acre property
Well,
with the
it
outbuildings?
sold, yeah, I would guess not, because we couldn't get 2.5 million for it. And as I said, we're not interested in the house, we're interested in the land.
Right.
And you know, basically, when you find land that you can use for this kind of thing, you're gonna end up paying the asking price for it.
All right. So what you're saying is that the city is at the mercy of one particular individual. Is basically what we're coming down to, is that we can't.
I don't know if
walk away
I'd
from
say
this
we're
deal.
at the mercy of one individual, but she asked for it, we were willing to give it, and at this point, I'm recommending we buy it, yes.
All right. And then Stephanie, you had mentioned a couple of years ago that the POET money was dedicated towards Lake Mitchell improvements. That was actually passed in as an ordinance.
No, it's not passed as an ordinance. We just don't rely it for doing our ongoing infrastructure maintenance for water distribution, since Lake Mitchell is no longer being used as a water source for water distribution.
Okay. I just wanted clarification on that. I know it had come up in previous meetings that might be used towards improving our, or getting a second source of water, and so that we're dedicating that for 20 years.
POET
it's
has
been
never
dedicated to the
discussed
lake.
as a-
Right.
Okay. And so, but we would be dedicating those funds for 20 years if this goes through?
Right, the debt service payment schedule that was shown was a 20-year repayment, but it would have the option for early repayment if we had the ability to.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
On the value of the land, you have to remember the 3 first bases. I can talk really loud if you want me to.
Yeah, I know, but people are watching on TV.
Okay.
JP will yell at you in a minute.
You don't want to make JP mad.
The only thing I was going to say is on the value of the land, you have to remember with what I do, you have to look at location, which I think when you say, you know, maybe you're paying too much for the, whatever you want to call it, the swamp ground, the bottom ground there, it's what you want, and it's in an advantageous location. So if I'm trying to sell you a lot on South Main or a lot by Cabela's, you know, which one right now is worth more money? You know, you have to look at the location of the property and the use for it.
Exactly. And this,
I'm
this,
just trying to help put people's minds at ease at
Right.
what they're paying for this stuff. So
this falls into exactly what we need, exactly where we need it. So, are we going to pay a premium for it? I don't know if I would call this a premium. We are at giving the asking price because we didn't want to lose the opportunity to be able to work with Lake Mitchell and the watershed using this property. Others?
I'm Jeff Harrison. I live right east of that land. You know, I used to own the land that the Kellys had. And it's beautiful land. I strongly support this. Another reason that you may not think of, but if a semi-truck overturns on 281 and it has a hazardous chemical in it, there's nothing keeping that chemical or plane that's crop dusting or spraying some insecticide has a crash up the stream, it can come down and we have no control over stopping that.
Very true.
This gives us control to stop that contamination. I know we don't use it for drinking water. It's important to try and get this lake turned around, and I feel that I guess I got a question, is it going to be huntable land then?
No, well, you can't hunt within the city limits, so
Correct.
if it's brought into the city limits, it will not be huntable. No.
Okay.
And the wish of the landowner, current landowner, is that it not be hunted. They do like it as a nature area.
Sorry, Ralph.
You want,
I don't want it hunted. I hunt across the road.
now there is a cornfield up there, or there is cropland that would still remain outside the city, and that would be up to the people who lease the land,
Okay.
as far as if it's hunted or not.
I guess it'd just be a matter of how high you made the dam. If the dam was a weir dam, that's you can take away and make it however high you want. Is there a valve in it?
There will be a gate of some kind in it, whether it's a valve or a Y gate or you know, I don't know. We don't have all that done yet, but as I said, we do want to be able to reduce or lower the level back there so we can do maintenance and whatnot, and what we need to do to maintain the vegetation and keep phosphorus out of the lake.
My only other concern is me living there. I think a lot of that dirt and ground would have to be lowered to do what you're saying. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, and it can be done, but my concern is there all of a sudden going to be 50 trucks running, and the dust concern, if that was going on, I'd be a concern to keep it watered down, and you know, just trying to be good neighbors, just like you said.
Right, and that's our goal. We're not trying to put anybody out with this. What we're trying to do is clean up Lake Mitchell, and we would certainly work with anything. We don't foresee 50 trucks or 20 trucks or 10 trucks a day or anything going through there. We don't have the exact design done. Of course, we can't do that until we have the land. So
Right.
we're in the first step of what we hope is a process and procedure to get this done.
And some of that would have to be shoreline stabilized before anything would be raised,
Right. We do know that.
because there's some cliffs there.
Yes, we have had
All right.
Mr. Van Overshield brought that up this morning as well. So,
All right, that's all I had.
thank you.
My name is Joe Kippis with the Lake Committee. I think I can speak for the Lake Committee. We haven't had a meeting since this has been announced. I mean, this is, you guys have done a good job of keeping a secret.
That was our goal.
So, but the people that I have visited with among our membership agree with this move, and they feel strongly for it. And as I recall, when we're doing our work coming up with a solution, the Near Lake solution described exactly what this is. It may not be in the entirety, but this was a very key part of developing a Near Lake solution, which involved a high percent of the phosphorus coming into the lake. So from that perspective, I think our committee feels very strong that this is a solid move, and certainly we like the momentum of this also. I mean, this kind of re-energizes our lake effort, and that's appreciated. The second part is just timing. I mean, we talked about all of these things, the location, you know, the price, but the timing to have this property come for sale. And for anybody who's wanted a piece of property but can't get it because it doesn't come for sale, you know how long you can wait, and it may never happen. So these things, these opportunities come along, and you have to be ready to seize these opportunities when they occur, if it's important to you. I think it's important. So I guess if you have any questions of the committee, we weren't involved in this, but we do like what we've seen. So
thank you. Others?
My name is Mike Valley. I'm also on the committee. I won't belabor this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, people say. It's more than that, because once this is sold to someone else, our chances of getting this is going to be really slim, because it'll go down from one family to another. This is just within 1 mile of our lake. When are we going to get an opportunity for low-lying land that's got some nooks in it that you can make wetlands out of? It just doesn't get any better than this. You had to scrape me off the ceiling when I heard about this. I mean, I was so excited. And I could go into a whole lot of other stuff that's probably already been mentioned and you know about it and we've fought for, but this is so timely. And I'm just going to quote Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player. And he said that he missed 100% of the shots he didn't take. And this is a shot that we have got to take. We do not want to miss this opportunity. Thank you. I urge you to pass this.
Thank you.
Yeah, one, to address Mr. Larson's question, I pulled up the website from the county. Total valuation on the assessor's page is $1,938,755 for the 40-acre parcel where the house resides.
Which is roughly 90% probably of what they totally valued it at. Right. Is that right?
That doesn't.
That makes sense.
That's for the 40-acre section.
Right. So it's 2 point some.
Yep. And then if I grab the.
and I will tell you that this house, I was involved in the design. The cost of the house was in excess of $6 million to build. Okay. So we're not buying a house at an inflated value. We're buying it at a bargain. Okay? You would not build this house. And that was, what, 15 years ago? Yeah. Mr. Harris, something like that? Yeah. You would pay in excess probably of $10 million today to build this house.
The ag land that we're looking at is divided into different parcels on the county site, so I'd have to figure out the.
That's because there's 2 or 3 different owners on that, but it's all within the family.
Yeah.
Right. And as I said, this is the way it was listed. We looked It was found by the realtor, and Mrs. Kelly chose to list it with a real estate company out of Colorado that specializes in these kinds of properties, as I understand it. So,
Mr. Mayor and Council, additionally, that 1 acre parcel with the toy shed is valued at $204,715 for the additional acre. So the total is, for the 41 acres, is $2,143,470.
okay, so we're in the ballpark, because that would be 80 to 90% of the value is what the taxes go at, roughly.
This is Stephen Larson again. Just wanted to say thank you for looking up those values. If you wouldn't mind, do you have those 2 or 3 parcels of cropland that we could calculate real quick? Or is it a whole slew of them? Okay, if you wouldn't mind. Just want to say I agree with this. It's just very short notice, and my concern is.
And the reason it's short notice is, number one, we've been working on this for several months, and we didn't want it out. I was worried it was going to get out into the public. Then you run the risk of somebody trying to buy it out from under you in order to hold the city hostage. So.
Right. Yep. Appreciate that. So it's nice to have an explanation on that, just to hear reasoning.
Right.
Puts my mind at ease. This was very short notice. I came into this very concerned, but having listened to you talk,
right, we've been working
reasoning behind it.
We've been working on this for quite a while, but in the interest of trying to keep it at a fair market value and the asking price, we've tried to keep it a secret. We didn't even tell the Lake Committee, and Mr. Powell was chomping at the bit, and the poor Lake Committee was meeting and saying, we're not doing anything, and I'm like, just relax, it's coming. So, it's been in the works. We've put a lot of thought into this. It isn't something off the cuff. You're just hearing about it because we finally got to the point where we could put the offer together and come to the council and ask for the approval of it, and it seems short notice, but it really isn't.
Right. Yep. Just looking out for perception.
I understand.
Mark Jenkins, Davidson County. Just putting up the assessor's page. The 80 acres to the northwest is at 137,880. The 160 acres, which is the northeast quarter there, is 264,605. The 91.84 acres, which does not include any of the house, is 161,895. And so for those acres right there, 564,390, if my math was
the ag land's taxed at a different rate than
right. Yeah, and that's not breaking down the farm ground from the other ground there, but that's just the quick assessor's page of it.
Right.
Thank you.
So just to go over those numbers real quick. Basically, house valued almost right on the penny. Cropland about $1 million short, but $1 million to clean up our lake is a pittance compared to the rest of the plan.
Right. The technical memorandum said we were going to pay upwards of 10 to 15 million.
Yeah. The dredging was 11 million, and the watershed was 8 million. So.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to get a big piece of that, for half of it, and we're going to use that to leverage additional grant funds to help us pay for more.
Right. Okay.
Which is a big part of this.
Right. Thank you for the time. That
you bet.
Sounds a lot better to me now.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll make a motion to approve the Near Lake property purchase proposal for the Kelly property.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. McCarthy. Second by Mrs. Sharks. Further discussion? Anybody from the audience wish further discussion?
I'd like to thank Bob and his crew here for all the hard work they've done in the last 3 months and keeping it quiet and getting it done and making things work as quick as possible. I mean, without your guys' hard work, this would not be possible.
Thank you. These guys did all the work.
And they only make land once, so we better get it now. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And I also want to thank the Kelly family for entertaining this, and they know it's good for the lake and it's good for the area. And Danny Allen's been personal friends with the family, and this has been kind of an emotional trip for him because of the fact of of Harvey just passing away just a few months ago, and it's a big step for them. But they know, and they know that it's going to be a great opportunity for the city of Mitchell and the lake itself. So I also want to throw that in there. Thank you, Danny. Make sure Peg knows that we appreciate it.
She'll know she's watching now.
Yeah, we do want to thank them, and it was a joy working with them to put this together. And I apologize for all the secrecy, but as I said, we wanted to keep it quiet so that somebody didn't come in and think they could hold the city hostage, buy it, hold the city hostage to do something with it. So it fell into our lap. It was lucky. Mr. Croce found it. Ms. Elwine put the numbers together with him and convinced me, because I had initially said, this is a spruce goose. This sucker ain't going to fly, man. And they talked me into it and kept pushing the numbers and things in front of me, and I saw the light, so to speak, and this will be huge for the city of Mitchell.
I want to clarify, Kevin, that your motion was to approve Resolution R 2019-11.
That's what it's called. That's what I said.
Perfect. Roll call vote, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Sharks.
Aye.
Allen.
Aye.
Barrington.
Absolutely.
McCardle.
Aye.
Dosher.
Aye.
Rice.
Aye.
Sabers.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we do have citizens input as we're required to have, so if you need to address the mayor and members of the city council on an item that was not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium, state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken. Does anybody wish to address the council? We're adjourned.